Good morning, everybody. How's everyone doing? It has been one absolutely crazy couple of days. I have had so many people reach out to me in the past 48 hours asking, what's the energy? What's going on right now? There's a lot of different physical responses that people are having: anxiety, worry, fear, frustration, anger, just being done. It seems to be the common thing that everyone is saying. I am just done right now. I want to be out of this mess. I'm tired of working with everything that's happening in the world and in my life and with the energies. And I'm feeling the same, so you're not alone in that. And I've been telling everyone to know that you're not alone. There's so many people who are experiencing this right now, and I think part of what is happening is that we're starting to feel that next wave of energy that's coming in, and you can interpret and define that in whatever way that you like. But as we move towards this, new earth, we all have this vision of a world where everyone is healthy and free, and we are creating a society and a world that holds everyone up with respect, and there is no hunger, and there is very little suffering, maybe no suffering at all. And that's what we're working towards. But we still have, I feel, another big hump to go through. It's like we're in the eye of the storm. That's what I keep seeing the past 2 days, is that there's this massive hurricane. And it's interesting because we are seeing hurricanes happening right now, but we're in the eye of the hurricane, the eye of the storm. And we've had this really beautiful summer in a lot of ways, and now we're getting ready to head back into the storm. But knowing that hopefully this is it. When we get to the other side of this one, we should be in a better place. And so there's a lot of different ways to approach that. I mean, we see a lot of people putting in their winter preparations and stocking up on food. And I hear a lot of people doing that, not from a panic perspective, but just in case they can't get out there, or just in case there comes a point where there's not as much food available on the shelves. But you can also do that. I know in the back of my mind, as we've been preparing for the fall and winter as well, is you can do that not from a greedy perspective, but from a perspective of, maybe I'm going to buy a little bit extra so that if there's friends or families or neighbors in my community who didn't do that for whatever reason, maybe they didn't have the means, the extra money to do that right now, maybe they didn't have the awareness to do that right now, that if they come into a place of need through the winter months, then I will feel more comfortable to share the resources that I've built up, and that it's not about me hoarding, but it's about, me saving and preparing for multiple people, if I have the means and the wherewithal to do that. And then it's also preparing, I think, mentally and emotionally and spiritually for what may be coming as well. I've been hearing a lot that we're going to be hit again with emotions, that our emotions are going to rise high, perhaps higher than they did the first time. And that it's going to be really important for us to know how to ground, how to come to a place of calm. And maybe it's not peace, but it's calm, and we can pull ourselves out of the fear state, even if it's just for a few moments, so that we can collect our thoughts and we can think rationally and we can respond from a place of calm. Even when we look at how the brain works, we know that when we're in a state of fear, we are not using all of our resources. From a neurological perspective, we are focused on our survival only, and that does serve us. However, it also can create these veils or blinders for us, that we don't see the whole picture, that we become unaware of illusions that are being presented to us, so that we stay in that state of fear. And you could say, well, I have a meditation practice or a yoga practice, or I run or I exercise, that will get me through, and it will certainly help. But in the next couple weeks, now is the time to really become masterful in that. So whatever it is that you do to find that calm, it doesn't have to be meditation. Meditation is fantastic, but if for you that hasn't worked until this point, it's probably not, a great time to rush into it. It's like when we see clients who are pregnant, it's yoga, and for pregnancy is wonderful, but you're not going to start, hot yoga flows when you become pregnant, because it's not the right time to do that. And that's what I'm hearing right now as well, is if you feel called to do meditation, certainly do it. But maybe now isn't the time to go into a deep, transcendental meditation, Kundalini meditation, really, really quickly, really, really rapidly. Find the practices that are going to bring you to calm. And if that means that's working out in your garden, great. If that means going for a run, great. If it's coloring on a piece of paper, if it's baking, whatever it is, find something. Get your playlist ready. Find a real solid practice so that if stuff does come up again, this is what I'm going to do to find that calm state. Even if I can only get there for 5 or 10 minutes, that 5 or 10 minutes is going to allow me to access more of my brain. It's going to allow me to access more of my intuition so that I can use the full capacity of my resources to decide, is this real or not? Is this true or not? What decision is best for me and my family in this moment based on what I know and what I feel? And it's going to be important for us to be able to do that. So get those practices aligned, and really take care of your stress levels right now. We don't want to be heading into winter really stressed out. And you can see there's already a lot of things coming up that are encouraging you to be stressed, or leaning us in the direction of stress, because the more information we take in, especially from the media sources, the more anxiety that is coded in those messages, the more fear that is coded in those messages. And so you have to be careful as you take that information in, but more importantly, as you take that energy in that is associated with some of those messages. You can watch and you can observe, and that's all helpful, but be mindful to not take the emotion in. So if we find ourselves, crying and getting angry, which is all normal, we don't beat ourselves up for it, we don't judge ourselves for it, but notice that that's happening, and noticing where those triggers are, so that you can manage them a little bit better if they start to get poked a little bit more. And that brings me to something that I'm feeling compelled to speak about today. I've been putting it off for a few days, actually, just make sure it's resonated with something that I need to put out into the world, because I don't want to contribute to the fear. And I also don't necessarily want to put myself or others in an uncomfortable or jeopardized position. But I've been given the go-ahead to talk a little bit about what's happening with our education system, and also to talk about some of the decisions and energies around this big decision for parents and children to decide to go back to school or not in a couple weeks. And this one is a big one for me for a variety of reasons. One, having children and being a parent, but also being someone who has studied education. And, while I haven't worked in the public school system, I've certainly worked in different education systems and studied the public school system from the outside, which, some would argue means that there's no validity to my opinions. But at the same time, it might also mean that I have a different perspective, because sometimes when we're in something, we're so close to it that it can be difficult to take the step back and see the big picture. And as we talk about the education system, I just want to be upfront and clear that what I'm saying is not meant to judge anybody's decisions in this matter, because I know how difficult and complex these decisions are, and there's a lot of different factors for every child and every family. And you have to decide what is right for you, what is best for your child, and what is best for your family, and basing that on the information that you have. However, I'm getting a lot of questions. I'm talking to a lot of different parents and teachers and educators and grandparents who are really struggling with this. So I think it's important to have a conversation around it. And so when we look at what's happening with the education system, about 2 years ago, I started talking with a number of my clients that were starting to feel the rumblings, right? Like, we had the teacher strike last year. That's not new. That's been around. There's been rumblings of issues and concerns before all this happened. This has just really brought them to the light. It's brought it to a head. It's pressurized it so that we cannot ignore it anymore. And about 2 years ago, I really began to become vocal about the fact that our education system has been failing us for a long time. It's been failing the children. It has lost its way. And when I say it has lost its way, I mean it has lost its connection with its purpose. When we really drill down, what is the purpose of school? What is the purpose of sending children to school? It's to get an education. Well, what is an education? And people define this in different ways. A lot of us have become wrapped up in the concept that education is about getting the skills and knowledge that you need to get a job someday, which there's not necessarily anything wrong with that purpose. It is one purpose. It's one path. It's one timeline for the education system. But I can't help but question how many people, how many adults are unhappy and unfulfilled in the work that they're doing. And so if we look at it from that perspective, if we go backwards, all of us who have, successfully graduated from this phenomenal education system that are unhappy, that are unfulfilled, that many of us now aren't even in jobs, or we aren't in jobs that are aligned with our full potential. So did this system serve us? Right? And if it didn't serve us, why are we perpetuating and relying on a system that didn't serve us? Now, some of you will disagree on that, and that's completely fine because your experience is different. In your experience, perhaps the education system did support you and you did get a job and you did find a career, or you did create something that has fulfilled you and has led you to the success and the intentions that you were going after. So you may have a completely different perspective, and that's fine too. But I want you to really look at your own experience first if you are a parent or you are a grandparent, and ask yourself, did it work for me? And work backwards from that. And then if we go a step further and we look at, if the purpose isn't to get a job, and so many of us are still going to say that it is, what could be another purpose for education? And another potential purpose that we see for education is that it's about allowing individuals to discover and explore those things that interest them most. So imagine, we're seeing all kinds of amazing children being born on the planet right now who are being labeled as having learning difficulties or attention difficulties. But when you work with a lot of these children, you will find that they have laser focus on certain topics. And so what would happen if the education system allowed children to explore their natural interests? So if I'm really interested in plants and animals and botanicals, if I was allowed to center my education around that subject matter, I can still learn how to read because I can read books about those topics. I can write about those topics. I can do math with those topics. I can do science with those topics. But what if we allowed that child who comes into this lifetime knowing what their mission is, to just start working on it? And give them the resources and the tools to become real subject matter experts in some of these topics really early on. Now, does that mean that they're stuck in that path? No, not necessarily. And what's interesting is that if we work with where they're naturally interested, we can still hit all of those other, fundamental skills that we're really building in the school system. So, we can teach them how to do the reading and the writing and how to have compassion and how to have social skill. All of that can be built while allowing children to explore what's really interesting to them. And there's a lot of fear, I find, around allowing children to do that. And the fear seems to be centered on, are they going to fall behind the other kids? Are they going to fall behind the curriculum? Will they be able to get into university if they haven't done the standard curriculum? Here's the question I have. If the whole system is falling and we really look, there's a lot of questions about what's happening in the university system as well. So, when I say the education system is falling, I don't mean K to 12. I mean the whole education system is falling. And that means the universities and the colleges. So if they're also evolving and they're also going to, crumble and be rebuilt, do we need to be concerned? We need to be aware, we need to question, and we need to look at all the options here. But if it is also evolving, unless your child is really close to hitting that system and may have to go in before the fall fully happens, it's a different story. But if you're dealing with, younger grades where they're not yet at that point, I wouldn't be so worried about it right now. Because even if there is, they don't follow the Ontario curriculum is changing as we speak, and they have time. And there's also this notion of, do successful members of society need the education at a university level? We have plenty of examples already in our society of people who haven't got that formal education, but have gotten the education through mentorship, through apprenticeship, through informal channels, through exploring and experimenting on their own. There's other ways that skill set and that mastery can be obtained outside of the system as it exists. So there's opportunities here for us to really look at these paradigms that we have created and how deeply ingrained they've been set in our own minds, and start to question them. Okay, even if you're not fully ready to throw them out, that's fine, but start to question them and ask, is my child someone who best learns within 4 walls from 9 to 3, following this very regimented process? And is that what's best for them? For some children, they do like that. But if your child is fighting that and they're not learning from that, are they going to benefit from being in that system when it's even more structured and even more regimented? Is that going to help them learn? Right? So the fundamental question I keep going back to as I talk to parents and as, we've made our own decisions for our own family, is ultimately what is going to serve the learning and development for that individual child. And I say that individual child because in some families you may have one child who may benefit from being in a system, perhaps. You may have another child that benefits from not. And so it's really looking at how are we going to best support their learning? How are we going to best support their emotional and their cognitive development so that they're in a space where they can continue to learn? Now, when we're learning, we cannot be in fear. If our brain is in a state of fear, right, we're activating very specific parts of the brain and we are shutting off other parts of the brain, or we're at least reducing the resources that those other parts of the brain have. So if when we're in a state of fear, we have blinders on, right? We have difficulty seeing the bigger picture. We have difficulty questioning things. We just make decisions to try to survive. So imagine being in an environment where that type of brain activation, whether conscious or not, is happening on longer terms, right? So it's happening for longer periods of the day just by the environment. It's going to be more difficult for children to learn. And if they are learning, they're going to be learning based on the fear response side of their brain, which is not necessarily the compassion, the kindness, the ability to analyze and integrate and synthesize different knowledge. And what we need in the world is we need more kindness and compassion and synthesis and analysis and integration to create holistic solutions to some of the problems we're facing. We don't want more people living in a constant state of fear, because that fear also is related to physical stress, which is related to illness. And I know there's a lot of kids who want to go back. So that's that's a discussion for you and your family to have, is that if that's the right path for you, then again, how do we look at everything that's happening, and how do we have the discussions, and how do we make sure we're prepared for dealing with some of these extra things that may be coming up? And if my child is really not suited, is not going to benefit from that environment, how do we make that shift, and what is the right process for us to really support the child? Because when we look at some of these measures that are being instituted now, my number one question when we look at the science of things, the research behind things, is what are the long-term effects of all of these new safety measures that we're putting in, from a physical perspective of the child, from an emotional perspective, from a cognitive development perspective, and from a social perspective? Can we answer those questions? Because there's a lot of conflicting information as it stands right now about the physical benefits of some of these measures. So if we can't answer that, our children, especially the young children, we know that children basically are sponges, and they're up to the age of 7 in particular, they're huge sponges. And what they're absorbing is all the unspoken rules about how you become a human, about how you interact with people, of what you're allowed to do to show love, compassion, anger, express your emotions, of how you exist in the world, of what's right versus wrong. And that's not happening from, it is happening from what's discussed, the discussions that are happening, but it's largely happening from observing their environment. Okay. And yes, it is the parent's responsibility to frame that. But when the child is outside the care of the parents, that child is absorbing all of the energy, all of the emotions, all of the belief systems of the other people that they are interacting with. So those, the younger children in particular, we really need to prioritize them. We really, really do. And look at, how is this going to affect their long-term perspective of the world? How is it going to affect their relationships with their peers, with their family, with their romantic relationships later on in life? How is it going to affect their confidence, their courage to exist in a world where germs exist? I mean, they exist, and they're going to continue to exist. How is this shaping them? And then stepping back from that, so looking at how it's affecting your own child, but then stepping back from that and looking at, how is this long term going to affect our world? 20, 30 years from now, these children are going to be the leaders of this world. So how is that going to affect them? And, we really need to start taking responsibility for the role that each individual, each one of us plays in our future state, in our current state, but also in our future state, because we have been convinced in some ways that we're just one person, and as one person, we can't do anything. We can't change the world. And so we have a tendency, I think, and this is all of us, I'm speaking for all of us, that we just place that responsibility on somebody else. Well, the government will figure that out, or we'll find the people who have the skills to lead us in that direction, or that won't even happen. We don't need to worry about it. We're just over analyzing too much. we are all part of this future that we are building, whether we like it or not, whether we want to take responsibility for it or not. We are all part of the founding leadership of the new earth. And every action that we take, every decision that we take contributes to how quickly we can solve these problems and contributes to the world that we are literally building as we speak. And for those of us who have the great honor to, coach and love and comfort these children who are going to be the future leaders, it is our responsibility to put them first right now. We need to put them first. Part of the message that I've been seeing as this next wave of energy comes through is I've been asking, what's the focus? What's the focus? Because we have a lot of light, we have a lot of good things that are happening. There's a lot of people who are working really, really hard around the clock to change us for the better. But we also have an equal force that's trying to prevent that. And trying to prevent that by really hitting our emotions. So I've been asking, what emotion? What are they coming to next? And I hate to say it because I don't want to create the fear, but I keep hearing that the next pressure point is the children. And so we really need to be vigilant right now. And we may need to make some difficult decisions, and we may need to reprioritize some things in our lives where it's possible. And I know it's not possible for everyone. But if you have the means and the wherewithal to prioritize your child's learning and development and well-being above all else, now's the time to do it. Now is really the time to do it so that, we have as many children as possible that are protected, that are allowed to flourish, that are allowed to really begin to sink in to why they were born on the planet right now. And to let's just let them grow in the way that they need to grow without trying to put them into a box, without telling them what it is that they need to learn. Yes, they need the foundations. Yes, we can help them with that. But let's also allow them to bring forward some of the solutions, because some of the most brilliant minds that I have seen in the last couple months have been under the age of 18. And we're not listening to them. We're not respecting them. You know who probably knows how to best solve this issue with going back to school? It's probably the children. But has anybody asked a child? Has anybody asked the children how they feel about going back? Has anybody asked them if they have any suggestions of how to best organize this so that everyone is safe? Has that even happened? Because we're not hearing a lot of discussion happening with the teachers. We're not hearing a lot of discussion happening with the parents either. So, this is the time for all of us to stand up and say, no, we're a part of this system. We have a voice in this system, or we should have a voice in this system. And if we don't, maybe this isn't the system for us. So that brings me to some of the options here. I want to talk about if you're looking at your child going back to school, and I know a lot of people have filled out the forms and made, the paper decision so far, but I know a lot of people are still on the fence and questioning and debating, was that the right decision for me? So we've been presented with two options. So one option is send your child back to school, and they will follow the schedule and the regime that's been set out by your school board. The other option is to do the online learning. I have a lot of questions about the online learning. My first question being, who's teaching it? Who's developing it? Where has it come from? How is it developed so quickly? Are they hiring additional teachers to do the online? Because there's no way in my mind that you can ask a teacher to teach in the classroom and also be running a full-time online class. So if that's happening, I have a lot of questions about that magical solution. I suspect that there's either an external contract that's happened, that this content has been developed so rapidly, or it was developed in advance without our knowledge. But there's a lot of questions around that. And you know what? It's okay as parents for us to ask more questions right now. If you want to know, in this scenario, what would happen to my child, and it's not clearly outlined in the documentation, ask it. If you have questions about who's going to be teaching my child online, ask it. Who's developed the content, ask it. Because it's okay for us to ask questions. It really is. I mean, there's so many of us that feel like we're not allowed to ask questions right now. You're allowed to ask questions, and this is your child. This is the most important person in your entire life, and it's their well-being. You're replacing their care in somebody else's care, even if they are at home with you and online. You have a right to know what's going on. You have a right. You have a right to be in the room. So there's, there's those two options that have been presented. And there's, there's this model I used to teach, and I still teach actually rarely, but regarding conflict and conflict resolution. And we're often presented with two options. This is the polarization of the world. You can do this or you can do that, and a lot of us probably as parents have done that with our children. You can do this or you can do that. Force them to make a choice, right? But neither choice actually resolves the problem in an effective way. We're actually losing in some regards, maybe not entirely. I'm not saying it's all bad, but we are unhappy with either solution, but we feel that those are the only two solutions that we have. Anytime we're faced with that, there's always a third. There's always another option that we often just don't see, right? And so when we're faced with the two and neither one is working, neither one is fulfilling us, that's when we ask ourselves, well, what could be another option? Is there something else that we could create that maybe feels better or works better or is a little bit better? It might not be 100%, but maybe it's 80% as opposed to 50% of what we want. And so I'm surprised to find out that a lot of parents are unaware that they have the option to completely remove their child from the system and homeschool. And there seems to be a lot of myths around that. At least, and I'm speaking from Ontario. I don't know the legislation. There's other people who know this way better than I do. And if you're on Facebook, just Google homeschooling. Do a little bit of research. Put your Google message in of homeschool and whatever province you're in, whatever town you're in. But there is a Canadian, I think it's Federation of Teaching Parents, Canadian Federation of Teaching Parents, I believe it's called, that you can look into. And you can basically write a letter to the school and say that you are going to homeschool your child, that you are going to take responsibility for homeschooling your child, and that then they do not have to be in the classroom and they do not have to be online, because the amount of time that has been set out for children to be in synchronous learning, which means that they need to be online, live, on a computer, is very high. And I'm not sure where they're getting that recommendation from, especially for the younger children, because it's actually been shown that less tech time is better for them. And having been someone who has completed and graduated with a master's of online education, I don't know where they're getting these numbers from. Unless there's been some new science, some new research that has come out, they seem quite high. So I have concerns about, children and teachers being online for that amount of time in a day. It's really difficult to manage and keep children engaged. And then there's all the questions about what's happening with the technology, for their development, their emotions, their health, even all of that. So you can remove them from the system. If neither of those options, if the online and the classroom do not feel like they are in your child's best interest, you can remove them. There's a lot of concerns about doing that. I hear from a lot of parents who feel that they are not qualified to homeschool their own children. there's so much that I would be happy to share with you on that, if that's a place that you fall. But a few questions that I've gotten in the last few weeks is, or I've heard other parents talking about as well, is, do you have to be tested as a child by the government, by the school board, to prove that you have the knowledge and wherewithal and the qualifications to teach your child? No, you do not. There's no test. There's nothing that you go through, but you have to commit that you have the intention to actually educate them and to make sure that they're learning, because every child has a right to learn and develop and grow and be safe as they learn, develop, and grow. The other fear that I often hear is, I don't even know where I would start. Like, I have never taught before. I haven't taught the curriculum. And there's this strong pressure, I would say, to feel like I need to be teaching exactly what is being taught in the school system. We're seeing lots of issues with the curriculum in the school system. So you may not want to follow exactly what the school system has taught. But yes, you probably do have some concerns about making sure that your child is learning at a similar pace or a similar rate to children of a similar age. There are so many wonderful people who have been homeschooling for many, many, many years, who have created curriculums that you can access online. Some of them are free, some of them are paid, some of them are low budget, some of them are high budget, but a little bit of time, take a day, do some Google searches, you will find some phenomenal resources out there to support you in that. So if you feel, you need a really structured program, then you can find that and you can download it, you can print it out, you can customize it for your child and your schedule, and away you go. And that part of the work is done. You can also pick and choose from different aspects. So maybe you like one particular way to teach math and another way to teach English, then you can pick from that. There's also methods out there of forest schooling, of being completely immersed in nature and learning by being in nature, because you can learn math out in the forest. You can take sticks, you can take different objects, you can look at nature's I'm losing my words. You can look at all of the geometry that exists in nature. There's also a movement of unschooling as well, which is really allowing the child to guide where they want to learn based on their interests. And if you watch a child who is in a loving, safe environment, they want to learn. Children are hardwired to learn. And guess what? So are we as adults. We want to learn. Our brains are designed to continually learn. And that happens by asking questions, right? So if you allow a child to be in an environment where they can explore a little bit, they're going to start naturally asking questions about the world, about their environment, about the people, about what they're reading, about what they're seeing. And those are all opportunities, right? Because just like you and I as adults, if we're interested in something, we're engaged in it. So we want to research it. We want to get those questions answered. There's a motivation there. And allowing us to follow the motivations of the child and then build the fundamental skills around that motivation is incredibly powerful. And it's incredibly powerful for our future as well, because those are the children who continue to maintain that enthusiasm and drive to learn and discover their entire lives. Those are the ones who invent new things, that invent, free technology in the world, because they're asking questions. They find some magnets and they go, how does magnetism work? How is this happening? And you could say like, oh, well, you'll learn about that. We'll learn about that in a couple months when we hit it in the curriculum. Or you could say, here's the spark. Jump on the spark. If you're trying to start a fire and you've got that spark, that's the time to really stoke the fire. If a fire is starting and you want it to grow, that's not the time that you walk away. That's the time that you stoke it. And it's the same with our children. Let's stoke those fires so that they can really start to enhance and grow quickly. So you have that freedom in the homeschool parameters to do that. The other challenge that people have with pulling them out is time. If I need to work, then how am I gonna homeschool? And here's another, illusion that has been adopted and accepted by a lot of us, is that homeschool needs to happen just like the school system of it needs to happen Monday to Friday, 9 to 3. And if I'm not filling that time with learning, then I'm a bad parent, or I'm a bad teacher, I'm a bad educator. No. Learning doesn't start at 9 and it doesn't end at 3. Learning happens anytime that a child or an adult is engaged in a learning process. Learning can happen on Saturday and Sunday. Learning can happen in the evening. Learning can happen in the early morning. The schedule is whatever you make the schedule to be. And here's the other important thing to note on that is the amount of time that it takes to do the learning is shortened in an environment where you have fewer children, and when you are focused on particularly an individual, or 2 or 3 children, when you're focused on their specific needs. When we're in a classroom setting, right, we're dealing with more children. We're dealing with getting in the classroom, taking off the boots, putting things away, dealing with the announcements of the collective. Like, that's an hour gone. Okay, you're dealing with the recess, getting dressed to go out, getting dressed, changed to come back in, that's taking time away. You're dealing with different behavioral problems that are existing in the classroom. That's taking time away from the education. In reality, a lot of children are probably getting about 3 hours-ish of quality education in that time frame, right? And the rest is accounting for the fact that the parents need to be at work. Okay, now that number is going to vary. Some teachers will have more, some will have less, and it's going to vary based on the age range as well. Obviously, a kindergarten classroom is going to have a lot more work to get boots and coats and everything on than a grade 8 classroom. So your range is going to change. But the reason I bring this up is that, when you're working one-on-one or one-on-2 or one-on-4 with children, you don't need to fill 6 to 8 hours with book work and assignments and tests and etc. You can do that work in a condensed period of time. You can spread it out throughout the day. Getting an hour in on reading, no problem, right? You could do that during the day if you were available. You could also do that in the evening. You could also choose to do to dive deeper into what it is that you want your children to learn in that education on the weekends, or on your days off. And we're seeing a lot of really great movement now. We've been talking about it in our community for a few years now, that there needs to be some alternatives. There are private schools, which are great, and they all have their own models, but not every family can afford private school. Not every family can afford to do a lot of investment financially into creating their own education system. And so there's a huge movement, which makes me so happy to see these homeschool co-ops where a few families get together and they share that responsibility. Because if the families need to work, then they need time to work, and the parents also need time to relax and restore as well. And so perhaps, one day a week, one family takes all the children from 2 or 3 families, and they teach, whatever content or subjects that they're experts in, that they feel confident in. And then maybe another day a week, another family takes all of the children and they teach what they're confident in. And that allows the other parents to have days where they can be working or doing other things or whatever it is that needs to happen. But there's alternative ways to schedule it. There's alternative ways to work with the time. There's alternative ways to work with needing to continue to work. Because the reality is a lot of families need to continue to work. And so it is a challenge to figure out, how do I make sure, especially with the younger children, that they're in a caring place, that they're well taken care of, so that I can put food on the table. And I can make sure that those physical needs are met, because those are also really important for my children. So if you're finding that you're feeling called in that direction, but you just don't know where to start talking to people, start asking questions, talk to the parents who are keeping their kids home, because they might be willing, if they have the means to have a parent stay home, perhaps they're willing to take on a child. Talk to your neighbors, talk to the other parents in your school system who are making other choices, because maybe they're willing to do a co-op, or maybe they can't watch your child 5 days a week, but maybe they can take them 1 or 2 days a week. Who knows? There's options out there, but we have to ask. We have to ask for them. We have to seek them out. We have to do a little bit of research if the two we're presented with are not making us happy and we don't feel they're working. Know that you're not stuck with those two. Know that there's other options, and there's ways to investigate, and there's amazing, wonderful people who are very skilled at this, who have a lot of experience in this, who are willing to share and who are willing to help do what it takes for the kids. So those are some things to consider. And for those of you who are going back, because I know there's a lot of teachers who are heading back too, and I really feel for the teachers right now, because there's so much happening, and I know you guys aren't getting the information either. There's a lot of anger being projected at the teachers, and I think we need to be careful with that, because these teachers are going to be taking care of your children. It's kind of like, don't be rude to your waiter because they might spit in your food. Your children are probably the most important thing in your world. So anyone who is caring for your child, you need to make sure you have a good relationship with them, especially if you're going to be leaving your child with them for unsupervised care during the day. We don't want to have an awful relationship with them. It's not a great scenario on anybody's side. So, we need to be mindful of what we're seeing, what's being presented to us in the media, and ask questions. Ask ourselves, well, is my child's teacher, do I feel that they are feeling this way and that they would be supportive of this idea? Or is this something that's coming, from a union perspective, who maybe didn't even speak with the greater population of teachers before they put it out? Is this, some sort of manipulation tactic to push our buttons for me as a parent to get riled up? And if so, fine. How do I want to respond so that my child will be in a caring, loving, safe space? That's all. We always have to go back to that question of, how can I ensure that my child is in a safe, loving space that's going to support their development to their highest good? And so I need to take responsibility for the role that I play in creating that environment. Because if I'm, getting angry and I'm creating an energy that is causing a response that is less than that, I need to take responsibility for that as well. And I'm hearing from a lot of teachers too that information is being sent back and forth, and it's not clear for them either. I'm hearing about teachers who are being told that they're going to have to switch, grades and subjects and all kinds of things last minute. And, that's not fair. It takes time to prepare a year's worth of lessons plans. It takes time to adjust mentally and emotionally to having a different age group of children or a different subject that you're teaching, and to think about, how am I best going to do that? And that's on a good day. I mean, you've got the added level of all this chaos that's being created as well. So they're also managing, all these new guidelines and the fears and the anxieties that are coming along with that for them and for the parents and the other administrators, and doing it without having clear direction. And I know that no industry has gotten clear direction in this by any means. So I'm not saying that they have it worse than anybody else, because I know, those of us who have worked through this process already, that we're opening sooner, we know. However, these are the people that are taking care of our children, right? And so I always go back to that point of, if someone is taking care of my children, I need to make sure that they are taken care of. This is not about me buying, a shirt. This isn't about me getting a service where it's just, a consumable. This is about my child. So it's very important for me to know what is happening and who are the people who are watching my child and how are they being treated, and is the system supporting all of the people, because all of those people matter. The children and the teachers matter. And so there's a lot of unknowns that they're trying to navigate. And plus, a lot of teachers have their own children. And so they're also navigating this as a parent, right? And having to potentially be in the school system and be separated from their child, and their child being in a separate school. There's a lot of anxiety associated with that as well. So rather than seeing ourselves as parents versus teachers, why don't we just see ourselves as parents, or humans who care about the lives of children? Okay? Because we all want the same thing here. We all want the people in those schools to be healthy, to be happy, to be free, to be well. That's the ultimate goal. So if we can come back to that, then there's less of this polarization of, one side versus the other. We're going to, what is our collective goal? What is our combined goal? What are we all trying to achieve, and what do we all need? And so for the teachers going back, I have a lot of love for those of you who are going back, fully aware of what you're stepping into. And for those of you, there's a lot of you I know who are going back with the mission to be there for the children. You're going back not because you agree with the system or because you're happy with the changes, but because somebody has to be with those kids in that environment. So for those of you who are going back with that, thank you. Thank you. Because I know people aren't thanking you enough for that. And we need to, as parents, we need to seek out those teachers. We need to find those teachers, and we need to support them. The teachers who are going to continue to create environments of compassion and love and support for our children. Celebrate them, please. Support them, please, so that they have the strength in this next year to stand up for the children. So that if things are being pushed too far, or measures are taken too extreme, or they witness things happening that are not right, that are not supportive of the children, that they have the confidence to stand up and say something, knowing that the parents will support them. They're going to need that, because those who are on the inside, they're the ones that are going to be the demolition derby, the demolition team that is pulling down the elements of the system that do not support the well-being of our children. And they cannot do it alone. They're going to try, and I thank them for that, but they need to know that they have parents who support them, that they have parents who are aware of what's happening, and that they know if the stuff hits the fan, as long as they're aligned with the well-being of the children, that the parents will walk beside them. Okay? Now I know there's a lot of teachers who are also going back, who are very fearful about going back, or fearful of getting sick, and fearful of the anxiety and the emotions and everything else. And if you fall in that boat, I would really, encourage you to take some time to reflect on why you're going back, and if there are any other options for you to take, because it is going to be, I think, a challenging year for everybody, and the stresses are going to be higher than they probably have ever been. And I really hate to see people going into environments and getting sick and giving more than they are able to give. And it's, it's back to that cliche example of if we are not strong enough to put the mask on our face as the airplane is going down, then we are not going to be strong enough to support anybody else. And so if you find yourself in a position where you have no choice to go back, but it doesn't feel like it's in your best interest to go back, please start to build your team of support around you now. Make sure you've got, you know, a naturopath or a massage therapist or a yoga teacher or, you know, anything. Have multiple supports around you so that you are really prioritizing your own self-care and your own well-being, and finding a place within you that you can step into that environment from a place of calm, because you owe it to yourself and you owe it to these children to be in a place of calm when you step into that environment. I mean, for me, it's really up for everyone to make their own decision. But for me, I have a lot of concerns about the children going back. I mean, I think about it daily right now, and am putting together some practices energetically that we can do to support the teachers and the students that will be stepping back into those environments, and the parents who are making these difficult decisions as well. But I do have some concerns, and I have a lot of questions about if education is meant to support the well-being of our children, and education is about learning, and education is about growth and exploration and all these beautiful things. If our system was truly focused on that, would they be putting in these measures? Would they? Because the system doesn't feel like it's about education right now. If we are focusing on separating children who we know learn socially, the best way for a child to learn is through social learning, interacting with other children. So we're limiting that. We know that language is developed by seeing people's mouths and faces, and we're eliminating that. We know that children need to move, especially now. There's a lot of children who need that movement and freedom, that there's a difference in how children learn when they're encapsulated in four walls versus when they're out in an expansive nature environment. And we're creating more walls, it seems. We know that children need time to learn, and we're reprioritizing the time where they may actually be learning, and reducing that and increasing time where they're simply following rules. And if we look at how, you know, take a step back and look at how this system mimics other systems, I mean, it just breaks my heart. It breaks my heart. I want to see the children of our world embracing freedom, not the reverse of that, not the polarization of that. I want to see children be encouraged to explore their ideas and their natural gifts. But more importantly, I just want to see children in an environment where they feel so alive and so loved, because it doesn't matter what is taught. If the energy of love is in the space, the children will thrive and they will naturally learn, and they will be infused with love. And the more people who are infused with love, guess what? From a quantum perspective, which, are we even teaching quantum in the schools? Are we even teaching magnetism in the schools yet? From the human biology perspective, is that if I'm in that space and I am full of love and I am resonating love and I am vibrating love and I am the loudest, I have the highest amplitude of love in that space, guess what? Everybody else, the atoms in their body, are going to have to come into a space of love, and they're going to start vibrating love. And then they're going to go home and they're going to vibrate love with their family, and it's going to spread and it's going to spread and it's going to spread, right? And so the biggest fear is that this illness is going to spread through the schools, and then it's going to, you know, that's going to be the thing that spreads it. What if it was the other way? You know, what if we hijack this grand plan, and instead of fear being spread, love was being spread? And I'm talking to the teachers who are awake, that are going back right now. That's the mission. You know, the greatest goal, this has been my goal for the past couple of years as an educator in other environments, is to reach a point as a teacher where you don't have to say anything anymore. It doesn't matter what you say, because the exchange isn't in the words, but it is in the energy. That you reach a point where your energy is so clear and so pure and so amplified that you don't need to say anything. You step into the space and you are vibrating at such a high level of love, at a high level of wisdom and freedom, and viewing the worlds in certain ways, that energy fills the room. It fills the room so that anyone who steps into that room moves into that knowledge in their body, in their subconscious, and then that drives them to seek out the conscious wisdom, to ask the conscious questions. So if you are a teacher that is going back, please talk to me, and I will teach you how to do this, because it is important. And in fact, starting in September, I'm going to be doing a meditation. I haven't put it up on my website yet, but there is a technique that you can use to do this. And we are going to be doing this on a regular basis. And there will be no charge for it. So there is no reason not to learn how to do this, because our schools cannot be overtaken with fear. They cannot. And anyone who is going back is going into an environment just like we all have as we've stepped into the grocery stores and the Costco's and everything else in the world. Fear has been anchored into them. Anxiety has been anchored into those spaces. It's not meant for the education system. It's not conducive for the education system for it to be full of fear. And you know what? Here's the beautiful thing. It takes one person to change that energy. It just means that you have to be 1 little hertz higher than the fear. You don't have to be 100 hertz. You don't have to be 1,000 hertz. You have to be 1 hertz above. That's totally doable. Totally doable. And if you're that one person who's 1 hertz above all the other energies in the classroom, in the school, guess what? You shift the energy. You shift that energy, whether anybody else likes it or not. Okay, and as you shift it and you teach the children to shift it, then you get that support of there's now multiple people shifting it. And you can do that with your mask on and with the footsteps on the ground. You can do all that. You can follow the rules, but hold a different energy. I think that's all I'm supposed to say today. That was a lot. And I'm sure there's more. The big message is tune into your heart. And if there was ever a time in our lives to make difficult decisions, to put the children first, now is the time. And if you feel like you're stuck and you feel like there's no options, please reach out to me. Even if I can't help you directly, perhaps I can put you in touch with other people who may have resources or connections or networks that can help you find the resources and the help that you need. Because this is the time we can manifest what we want right now, but it's not going to come without us taking action. I mean, we have to take personal responsibility for the life in the world that we're creating. And each one of us that takes those actions and takes that responsibility contributes to the global change. We really do. We really do. We've been convinced that we don't have the power, but it takes that one person. One person's energy can change an entire room, can change an entire building. And that is based on science that's not being taught, right? So keep that in mind. And take these, these next couple days as the summer comes to an end, and really take care of yourselves and listen to your heart and get out and ground and earth and be in nature and do whatever you need to get as calm and as confident and as courageous as you can as we move forward. And please, please, please know that you are not alone. You are not alone. If you are not finding the people in your circle that feel the same way as you, reach out to me, okay? I'm talking to so many people on both sides, on different perspectives, and in the neutral, you know, which is also a really important place to be as well, to be able to see both sides. And so there are people out there. They may not be in your immediate circle, but they are out there. And we can start to make those connections, or we can start to help facilitate those connections if they haven't been happening yet. Okay. Much love to you all. Hopefully this video gets up. It takes literally a couple of days sometimes for these videos to get up. It's crazy. So we'll see, fingers crossed, and stay tuned for September. I'm no longer on Facebook. So if you've been looking for me on Facebook, I'm not there. I've deleted those accounts. I'm happy to explain why, but they're gone. So you will find me on Instagram or on the websites directly. So if you haven't signed up for the newsletters, please head over to soulinstitute.ca or jenniferkavanagh.ca, and you can join my newsletters, and that's how I will announce the energy meditations that I'll be doing this fall, to help support everybody to stay in a place of calm and to stay energized as we go through this next phase and whatever's coming. Knowing that we're going to get through it and we're going to get to the other side. I have seen the other side, and it's amazing. It's amazing. We just have a little bit more work to do. We just have some work. So we hunker down and we get the work done. And then we celebrate once that's been finished. Okay. Much love to everybody. Take care.